Okay, so this is Till We Have Faces, Part 3. This is Ann Fields, Jenna Minnelli, and Megan Sproul.
As per tradition, we're going to recap our listeners with what has happened in this section that we just read. Just really briefly, where we left off the last time was that, remember, Oral found out that Psyche was on the mountain. She's, trying to convince Psyche, hey, if you can't see your husband, he might be some sort of freak. Listen to me, come home, I'm like your mother. She wouldn't listen. So she went back, and now that's where we left off, that what is she going to do? She needs to get it off her chest and talk to someone? Is she going to hold it to herself? And so that's what we find out this time.
Mm-hmm. So we begin this section with Oral telling the fox about what happened, leaving out the all-important part of the fact that she saw the palace for a split second, so she didn't tell anyone about that. But she's explaining to the fox what happened and how she met Psyche and how Psyche's still alive, and the fox is at first really happy, but then Oral's wait, there's more, she won't come back, she is making stuff up, she's insane, and the fox is well, we have to help her somehow, and Oral is left to herself, and she makes up her own plan to go save Psyche without talking with the fox first.
And I think what's important to add to that is the fox so far has had the most logical explanation of what's going on in the mountain, whereas last section we talked about how Bardia's oh, it's some monster that she's lying with. Whereas Fox, who we've known from previous passages, he's a very philosophical, logical person. He says, well, there's men up on the mountain, right? There are thieves and beggars and stuff. So his explanation was that one of them probably rescued Psyche and pretended to be the god of the wind and said, oh, I'll take you to the god of the mountain, left her there, came back in the night, and then that happened. And so that alarms Oral, I feel as much, if not a little bit more, than the fact that she might be lying with the beast, because they have this royal name to protect, and the fact that she's giving herself to this peasant, this lowly person, is very disgraceful.
And Fox also says that Psyche is under the impression that all of this is magic, and she believes that because the thief or the beast are influencing her to make her believe that it's actually magic and that it's actually the god. And
they believe, Fox believes that these two are kind of manipulating her because of her childhood fantasies of wanting to go to the mountain and thinking it was beautiful. They, of course, probably wouldn't know that, but the fox thinks that she's gullible because of that. So, as Megan said, that the fox told her to wait until he made a decision, but this horrified her so much that she decided she was going to take matters into her own hands.
So, Oral has been training with Bardia a little bit already with the sword, so she's hey, I'm going to go out alone, and Bardia's no, I can't come with you, take... Oh, what was his name? Graham. And so Graham, who really just doesn't talk at all other than maybe saying, yes, ma'am, escorts Oral to the mountain back to where she met Psyche the first time. And then Psyche and Oral have a little confrontation, I guess would be a word for it. And Oral is trying to convince Psyche, use this lamp and see what he looks like in the middle of the night. And then maybe you'll believe me that this is not good for you.
Yeah, it's more like a blackmail argument, because she's basically saying either shine the light in his face or I'm going to kill you and myself. So Psyche pretty much has no choice.
Yeah, and Psyche mentions that it's not the fact that Oral was going to kill her that makes her upset, it's the fact that Oral was going to kill herself. So that's what Psyche said was more important to her.
And this whole time, even before this kind of blackmailing idea, Oral kind of tried to play off of the off of the I'm your mother figure. Like, did you have a father? Like, the king isn't barely a father. I was the only mother that you ever really had. I'm your mother and your father. Why are you disobeying me? And then Psyche just keeps going back to, like, well, I don't want to disobey him, my husband, and I have another duty to serve. So then she does finally agree when she's threatened. It's more believable, Oral's threat, because even before she makes the threat, she does stab herself. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, kind of Psyche's reaction is like complete shock. And so if that happens, she thinks, well, maybe she would take it a step further. So she agrees to take the lamp. And this part I thought moved pretty fast. Basically, like, Oral's waiting for her to go in to take in the lamp, and she does. And as soon as she takes in the lamp, then there's, like, a big storm. So you just left to assume, like, oh, okay, whoever was her husband woke up, but she didn't do a very good job of hiding it, because we don't know, again, based on narrator and perspective, we don't know what happened inside the house, but we can assume that her husband woke up, that he's actually a god, because he was making this whole storm, and then also because Oral actually saw him afterward, mm-hmm. and he kind of had a few words for her.
Yeah.
And he wasn't even... she comments that he wasn't really mad at her. Like, he didn't have any anger in his voice, I think is, like, similar to the words that Oral uses. But he exiles Psyche and says Psyche is left to wander around on her own, and says Oral will be the next Psyche. So that's Oral's first meeting of Psyche's husband, so to speak, and it obviously didn't go very well.
And he cannot protect her.
Mm-hmm. Which I feel like that part's pretty important, what he says right there, because he says, like, I can't protect her, saying that he would want to, like, that he does genuinely care about Psyche, and so then that leads you to question a little bit, well, and why did he send her on exile? So then you have to know, well, there's probably a little bit more to the story as the whole reason. Like, maybe it's not just the fact that he's this really insecure god, like, oh my god, don't look at me, I'm ugly. That's probably not what it is. It's probably more like maybe this is a forbidden love. Maybe people, you know, maybe the gods frown upon fraternizing with mortals, and maybe he's not supposed to do this, but he did it anyway. So there's probably a big reason behind the whole, like, collapsing of the palace and why he sent her out on exile. But from that line alone, we know it's not just because, hey, you disobeyed me. It was, you know, I care about you, but this has to happen.
And it reminds me a lot of the Adam and Eve story, because, like, there's Eve obviously disobeys God and eats the apple of the tree of wisdom, and everything collapses. Like, the Garden of Eden collapses, just like her palace collapsed, and there was, like, a huge storm, and there was a huge flood, and all of the land turned to, like, rock, and it reminded me exactly of the Adam and Eve story.
Yeah, it's very this is a common theme that stories like to take about obedience and stuff like that. You come upon stories like that even in Greek mythology before this, like Pandora's box. You know, the saying, like, curiosity killed the cat. So it is very common, kind of confusing as we relate it to our own lives, because this isn't a situation that we would come upon, but we can see, like, certain things like, especially growing up, when you lose your innocence, you cannot go back to, like, looking at the world in the same childish way. As soon as you know everything, you can't go back to the way things were. So in that way, it's a little bit relatable.
And C.S. Lewis is, like, he's very much a Christian, and in all of his books, he references the Bible and all the Bible stories. Like, even in the Narnia series, mm-hmm. he references the Bible all the time. So it makes sense that he would reference, like, the Adam and Eve story within this book.
So fast forward a little bit. Now, after Psyche has been exiled, Oral goes back to the castle, goes back to her house, whatever you want to say, and starts working with the king again, and so Oral decides that she's going to be veiled from now on as a kind of respect kind of for Psyche, I guess, like to hide herself. And then she confronts the king also, so her trip to the mountain after seeing the god makes her less scared of the king, so she's able to confront the king, and then the king slips and falls and gets injured and gets sick. And
yeah, they're pretty sure he's gonna die.
yes.
And they start actually, Bardia and the fox actually start referring to Orwell as the queen.
Yes. And then, at the very end of the chapter, thinks she hears Psyche moaning and wailing out in the garden, and she goes out to investigate it, and then she gets pulled aside by a guy, and we have no idea who that guy is, because,
It's kind of like a sketchy dude. He's like hooded and...
He calls her sweetheart.
Mhm.
yes.
Yep.
So, this guy said, "Softly, sweetheart," said a voice, "take me to the king's threshold." It was wholly a strange voice and a man's, and that's where it leads off. So we have no idea who this person is and what he wants.
Rhetorically, going back to the metaphor of the veil, really, she decided to wear it, like Megan said, after she came down from the mountain, and that was for respect for Psyche, also a shamement of what she had done, and also feeling human in a way, because after coming up to the mountain and talking with the god, she said that she wasn't afraid of the king anymore because she really feared the god of the mountain, and that goes back to the whole thing that Psyche said last section, that, you know, well, if you're in the presence of a god, like, you would feel ashamed just for being immortal, and so that's a little bit of mirroring there a little bit.
And it's also very interesting because the king, when he is ill, like in his like deathbed almost, he refers to Orwell as two different people. Like, he wants the old Orwell back, but he sees the new Orwell with the veil. And he's like, get that monster away from me. So it's very interesting just to see how he refers to almost like the different personalities of Orwell.
In fact, even when the veiled Orwell is in his room, he's like, "Get away from me, I know who you really are. Orwell, come get her away from me." So he legitimately doesn't know that it is Orwell, or in his madness on his deathbed, he doesn't know it's Orwell. So, like, it's not just something he's kind of faking. Like, he thinks that that's not Orwell.
And that can be representative of past a confrontation between, like, Psyche and Oral, that Psyche told her, like, I don't even know who you are anymore. This isn't, like, the girl that I grew up with and stuff like that. And so him not recognizing her, you know, is there, like, is it just the veil? Probably not. Is it like this aura that she has around her, like, from being in the presence of God? Maybe. Is it more likely that she just is trying to find herself again in this confusion, in this whole conflict of her love for Psyche is making her lose herself? Probably more likely.
So, let's really look at the scene where Oral is trying to convince Psyche to look at who her husband really is, because it's a pretty important scene in the book as a whole. It kind of shows a change both in Oral and Psyche's relationship.
That they have. To show you I'm an earnest girl, listen. You have driven me to desperate courses. I will give you your choice. Swear on this edge, with my blood still wet on it, that you will this very night do as I commanded you, or else I'll first kill you and then myself. Oral, she said, very queen-like, raising her head, you might have spared that threat of killing me. All your power over me lies in the other. Then swear, girl. You never knew me break my word. And then Psyche later responds, you are indeed teaching me about kinds of love I do not know. It is like looking into a deep pit. I'm not sure whether I like your kind better than hatred. Oh, Oral, to take my love for you, because you know it goes down to the very roots and cannot be diminished by any other newer love, and then to make of it a tool, a weapon, a thing of policy and mastery, an instrument of torture. I begin to think I never knew you. Whatever comes after, something that was between us dies here.
So it's a very, very strong passage, obviously, because it's the passage where Orwell threatens to kill herself as well as Psyche if Psyche does not
Take the lamp.
yeah, take the lamp. Mm-hmm. Take the lamp into the palace. So, the tone obviously is very, very threatening, and it's almost very scary, especially for Psyche, because Orwell just stabbed herself to prove her point, and Psyche's like, "Oh, you're being very, very serious."
I think too, in the part, at least coming from Psyche's perspective, her tone is very calm, which is kind of strange. But you know, it said she was very, very queen-like. She was very poised and stuff. That she's really taking in everything that's happened. She's internalizing it. She's making her decision, and she's doing it calmly, probably in a way that she doesn't want to, you know, frighten away Oral. It kind of reminds me of like talking to a stray animal, or like calming it down a little bit. Yeah. That, you know, Oral is all this like high in her anger and everything, and you know, Psyche's just like, I need to bring her down a little bit from this, and I'll tell her, you know, I'll do what you say, just like, you know, and I think it's important, the fact that Psyche isn't like angrily yelling back. Really is a testament to her character and her progression, especially as she's maturing into this young woman after being taken in by the god of the mountain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think Oral's kind of, we can learn a lot about Oral too from the scene, and like, she will not let Psyche go. She is 100% like invested in bringing Psyche back, and it takes her obviously it changes her, but it almost takes her too far. Like, she is threatening, and she has kind of passed a threshold of like, is it really right to blackmail someone that you love into doing something they don't want to do? Like,
it's walking on a thin line. It's
yes.
like gray matter type thing. Mm-hmm. And it's this whole entire section, and it goes longer than what we just read. It's dripping with pathos and ethos, especially, I mean, it's logical too, you know, Psyche's response is, you know, I mean, put yourself in those shoes. If you love someone, you're like, okay, I'll do it, even though I don't want to. But like pathos-wise, you know, especially my favorite line was Psyche talking about, you know, I'm learning new things about different kinds of love, and your love that tortures me in a way. And so kind of like that passage that we just read about don't treat a book that way. Are you going to be the sadistic lover kind of thing? Or are you going to be like the like gentlemanly lover? That's not the word that I used, but I forget.
Courtly
love,
or carnal.
So, you know, in that sense, like, applying this to humans, it's not like soft love anymore. It's I'm gonna be tough with you, and
it's tough love.
I mean, there are other sections too, but I really go back to that same paragraph that Psyche talks about is, you know, and she really has the authority and relatability of people that get into tough relationships and stuff like that. I'm thinking of like abusive relationships and stuff like that people go into, and you know, those of us that aren't in those type of relationships, we're really like, well, why would you stay with that person? But you know, if you ask those people, they're like, well, it's not necessarily that I'm afraid of them, it's just I believe that this is the type of love that I deserve. Mm-hmm. And so this is kind of the type of love that was new to Psyche, as she was talking about. You're teaching me about new kinds of love, that she doesn't question if this is love. She knows it's love, but it's so different than what she's used to, and it's almost it's abusive in a way. It's almost, you know, love for selfish gain. That, you know, as much as Oral cares about Psyche and wants what's best for her, she really is just doing this for reassurance for herself. Like, I need to be reassured that you're not doing this, you're not spending this time with a husband that's tricking you. Like, I need to be reassured that our royal name isn't tainted, etc. And, you know, instead of just putting it back on Psyche and saying, like, if you're comfortable with this, if you trust this person, you know, you'll be with them, and I trust that you'll do the right thing.
And looking at this passage within the framework of the entire story, in the beginning, she wrote, like, she was writing this against the gods. So I think it's important to realize she put this in the story, even though it kind of paints herself in a bad light. I mean, it also, I guess it shows exactly what she means, like how far the gods drove her to go. But I thought it was important to look at it within the entire story and see this is how bad the gods really are, so to speak, in her mind. They drove her to do this, and she's still writing about it, what she did that was really, really tough.
And, you know, the last part of that section, too, really, you know, is anticipating and foreshadows a little bit of what might come a little bit. You know, Psyche said, I'll do this because I love you, but what we have right now, it dies right here. So, you know, that leads to the question, like, if Psyche is alive, will she want to see Auril? Will she come back home? Will she be happy? You know, will she ever understand why Auril's doing this? And from the looks of things, probably not. You know, because from this point on, from the beginning of the book, Psyche has always been this, like, sweet, kind of, you know, innocent kind of girl. And in this passage also, she kind of, like, went at Auril. She wasn't afraid to fight back either. And she was kind of saying, like, hey, you don't understand about this because you're a virgin. Mm-hmm. Which, although I thought it was funny, but it was also, you know, pointing at, like, hey, I have more experience than you. I'm more mature than you. And that's kind of incredibly true. Although, you know, she in that case, she's talking about sexual maturity. But it, in all honesty, like, regular mature-wise, it shows, especially in this passage, that, you know, Auril's the one that's screaming. And Psyche's the one that says, okay, I'm not going to like it, but I'll do it. And so, you know, that the roles have really flipped. Whereas Auril, you know, saying, I was your mother, I'm the one who took care of you this whole entire time, and now Psyche is kind of the one that's being the maternal figure, yeah.
Which
too.
I feel kind of is even relatable in real life, with especially this year with all of us going off to college. I'm sure we've all had confrontations with our parents about, like, where we're going to go and everything, like, if we're living on campus, and we're all at that age right now where we're starting to become a person who wants to do stuff on their own, who wants to go out into the world, and we're becoming adults. A lot of us are 18 already, and it's something that's relatable in real life. That, and although these two are really close in age, but still in real life, like, a lot of times parents have trouble letting their kids grow up, and in this case, or you can see kind of a similarity in how Auril doesn't want to let her child, so to speak, or the person she's raised, grow up, and it's just kind of relatable and parallels real life.
But next time, stay tuned, because we're going to find out who this strange man is, and also what Auril's going to do with her queen-like powers. Is the king going to die? Who knows? Is Psyche dead? Who knows? You know, you'll have to stay tuned and find out.
See you next time.
Bye.
Peace.